get that, emotional honesty across, emotional truth. Obviously, I don't always succeed, but that is definitely, I would say, the goal of that true, scene, that sentence, that word, whatever it is. If it can, sort of generate, like I say, an emotional response, then I feel that I've done my job.
So we've talked about how some of the impulse of your fiction comes from your life, and it might be useful for people to know about your background, and because growing up in the Mennonite community, which I'm not sure how much people know about the various Mennonite communities around the world, that informs most of your books, if not all of them.
Again, yes and no, right? To to a degree, smaller or larger, but it's but certainly there is always that. Always when I'm writing my characters, whether they are overtly or directly Mennonites, in the book itself, they're always Mennonites in my mind, really, in a sense, for the most part. Certainly, that's and it is the world that shaped me. That I grew up in a very, very conservative, traditional Mennonite, religious, patriarchal, punishing community, where the roles for men and women were, of course, very strict, and it's not an exception in the world. We know that it's not just the Mennonites, but sort of isolationist, very, very fundamentalist community where the scripture of the Bible was interpreted, basically for the benefit of the male church leaders, and they set the rules, and we followed those rules, or we were out. So that kind of a childhood, upbringing, yeah, definitely, it has, I think it has really shaped me, and I didn't even really feel that when I left originally, when I started writing, in my 20s, after I had left my community. I didn't even think that it was something that, would have had that much of an impact on me, that would have really informed everything that I write in one way or another. I just wanted to get out so badly. I just wanted to get out and experience the world and get an education and travel and be free and find a secular society, some sort of community where I could be myself in. And I never really thought that it was going to be this, kind of life-giving or life, impacting kind of thing. And yet, obviously, it is. It is something that I keep going back to and back to and back to. And I always say, okay, that's it. I'm done with that. I've written enough about that. But the ghosts that haunt us, that it's all there, always right there. And it wasn't all bad either. And
well, I was just going to ask you that. You sort of answered the question anyway by talking about how it informed your art and your creativity. But the negatives of a oppressive patriarchal community very obvious to everybody. But were there any positives? Is there anything positive about those communities?
Yeah, absolutely there was. I think certainly, that a sense of humor that we, particularly girls and women, but also boys and men, developed a subversive sense of humor, a kind of, throwing stones at the castle walls kind of thing, so that when we got together, and we were often separate, men from women, etc. And so I spent a lot of time, as we all did, with girls and the other women in my family, my relatives, my mother, my sister, my aunts, cousins, etc. And a lot of it was making fun, in a sense, of our male, you could say, oppressors, but just making fun of the church, basically, making fun of our place in it, and trying to kind of form a solidarity in that. We knew which lines we couldn't cross, really, in a sense, and there were obviously detractors amongst us, spies who would relate what we had said back to the elders, but we knew that we could. So that was something that has helped me in life, and something that has drawn me to other groups of women, or women and men. But that sense of community, that sense of bonding that comes from sort of similar suffering in a way, and humor, and rebellion. So, so that was something good. I mean, it sounds like it was something negative that became good, but I mean, there's so many things about the community that I miss. I miss the everybody knows you, everybody knows your parents, everybody knows where you come from, which church you. That obviously can be a tyranny and horrible, but it can be good when you're a little kid. I mean, the hymn singing, the sort of genuine expression of faith, of humility, these are good things.
Well, it's like life, good and bad things are happening all often at the same time. One of the things about all my puny stories and some of your other narrators in your other books is that they're disposed towards thinking back to themselves in their childhood and this sort of sense of innocence. And I wondered if there was a moment for you as a child or a teenager where you kind of realized that you were going to write books and that was sort of your job. You were an observer and a narrator of your own life, and when that moment might have arrived, and if there were particular literary influences on you that galvanized you to do that.
Originally, when I was a kid, my father was a teacher, and he was an anomaly really in this community. But he always encouraged me to read and to write. He would get me to write things. If I was bored, he would say, "Here, why don't you write half a foolscap of whatever you want to write?" And then he'd mark it. Even if it was total utter crap, he'd give me an A+.
Foolscap is a real blast from the past.
Foolscap. I don't know if anybody uses that word anymore.
It was kind of A4, but like an inch bigger.
Yeah, like a long. Lined piece of paper. Anyway, but obviously there was resistance to it. It didn't occur to me that I could write something, particularly as a woman in this kind of a community. Still, the resistance is there. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to express yourself in this way and expect other people to read it, to care? I mean, that's something that I grapple with all the time, still, and always will, I'm sure. And I think that I had a professor when I eventually did leave my community. I had a journalism professor who he said, "Look, if you want to be a journalist, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. But what I really think you should do is go back to your ramshackle house and write fiction." Because I was making up journalistic articles, which you can't do for our student newspaper, etc. I mean, it's just like completely unethical. And so he sensed this. I was always trying to make the story just a little bit better. What I thought was better. Anyway, but there were various people along the way, and also literary influences. I had a high school teacher, again, another anomaly.